Chapter 10. So now we've worked through and we've kind of decided how we're doing our project. We've looked at the organization, we've defined what the project is, we've done some estimating, we've developed our project network, we've looked at how we schedule resources and costs, we've talked about how we're going to reduce our duration of our project when necessary, and we've really talked also about managing risk. So now, what are we up to? We're going to go down here and we're going to talk about the project manager for Chapter 10 and what the keys are to being a project manager, and also where some shortfalls and pitfalls come. So managing versus leading, I think I talked about this in last week's class. Really, they're two different concepts, right? When you're managing people, you're formulating plans and objectives, you're monitoring results, you're taking corrective actions, you're doing all the things. But when you're leading people, you're getting them on board. You're making them part of it. You're making them feel what's going on, and that's really what's going to lead you to success. So, people may start off as managers, and the goal is to really become a leader. Or sometimes people see that people have leadership characteristics within them, and that's why they become a manager. You can't simply become a manager because you're a really good employee. You become a manager because you can lead other people. So leaders, they initiate change, they provide direction and motivation, they innovate and adapt as necessary. They make the hard decisions even when they might not be liked for them. And I think it's something in people, when you see it, you know it, and you really want to engage with them and be a part of what they're doing. Engaging project stakeholders. Project managers really have this role of making sure everyone is engaged and everyone is involved and they're getting people what they need. So stakeholders are the people and organizations that are actively involved in the project, not just the people that are doing it, but those that are also affected by it. Project management maxims, things that you have to remember is that you can't do it all. I'm probably one of the worst for this. I feel like I should be able to do it all for everyone. You can't. So you need to recognize that there's this happy medium of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, and the relationships you build in the hopes that you have trust in your people and your people trust you and they're going to do the things that need done so that it can all work together. Hands-on work is not the same as leading. So a project manager can't be a micromanager per se and make sure everything is done and just want to do it themselves, because the project won't be successful and it won't get off the ground. What's important to you likely isn't as important to someone else. Remember, we talked about this last week. You're managing all these expectations and responsibilities, and we need to kind of make things flow. Remember, project management is tough, exciting, and rewarding. Endeavor to persevere, and it's so true. You're going to come through different stages of the project. You're going to come through different stages of different projects. Some are going to be great successes, some are going to be great failures. I've had projects on my desk where from the get-go, you knew it wasn't going to be good and people weren't going to be happy and they weren't going to be on board. And as the project manager, you kind of have to take this lead and take this charge and push through even when it's tough. I've had projects where it seemed to make sense at the beginning, and as we got to the middle of it, just based on what our organizational structure was, it wasn't going to happen. And then I've had ones where I thought in the beginning it just wasn't a good idea, but as time ticked and things changed, it made sense. And again, that's sometimes that our priorities are not the same as the greater organizations, and maybe we don't fully understand them. And as we get more engaged, we see why they were doing what they were doing, and then it makes sense. It's kind of like when you're a kid and you're doing things that your parents tell you to do because they tell you to do them, and you don't think that it's what you should be doing. And then you get a bit older and you realize, oh, the reason my parents were making me do that was because of X, Y, and Z. And it was the greater good. It was what was going to get me where I needed to be in the end. I just didn't know it at the time, right? So all these things are what a project manager is dealing with. There's exciting times because you're launching new things, or you're doing new activities, or you're bringing on a new venture, and it can be super rewarding. And then there's nights where you realize everything's going downhill, and it may be New Year's Eve and you're in the midst of getting ready for a party, and you realize that you need to re-engage yourself and your team because there's something that's going to be happening the next day and you have to be prepared for it, right? That may have been a situation I've been in. It's all about understanding that the good comes with the bad, right? And the opportunities and the great stuff is going to come. Some days it's just not going to be so great. And just balancing that balancing your stakeholders' expectations and balancing your expectations of yourselves. So network of stakeholders, when we talk about the project manager just not being able to do simply everything all the time and having to have people engaged, this is what a lot of projects are going to look like. So here you are as the project manager, and you've got your team, and you've got your project, and you've got contractors, and you've got vendors, and you've got administrative support staff. Maybe you have government agencies involved, because we talked about last week, there could be time crunches for things that have to happen that have been mandated. Maybe you work in an industry that's highly regulated. So when I worked in aerospace, when something came down, there would be government regulation on how we had to follow through and the timeline to do it. And so you're managing those things, you're managing your clients and your customers, the functional managers of the teams that you're borrowing people from to work on it, other project managers, other organizations, depending on what's going on. There's a lot of balance, and a lot, like, it's a great role for somebody who likes to be involved in a lot of different things and have the change. Because it really is a constant of that. Some projects are going to be days, weeks, months. Some projects are going to go longer. You may have multiple projects on your plate at the same time. And you're balancing a lot of different pieces. It also requires you being organized, because you need to be able to know what's going on with all these things, which is why having project management software, something like MS Project, is nice to have, because it's going to give you an update of what's going on, when and where everybody is, so that you can get a quick highlight of follow-up of what's important and what's in crunch. Influence is an exchange. So project managers really have to be the people, again, that are working with all these different groups and making sure that they all, feel involved and they're all willing to participate. So the law of reciprocity is that one good deed deserves another, and likewise one bad deserves another. So ideally, treat people the way you want to be treated. Give them what they need in order to be successful, and they're going to give you what you need in order to be successful. Quid pro quo, mutual exchange of resources. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And influential currencies. Cooperative relationships are built on the exchange of organizational currencies. So you'll find as people develop trust in you, you're kind of getting an influential currency. They're more willing to do more or to trust what you're saying because you've built this relationship. Commonly traded organizational currencies. So here's just a list of things. There's task-related ones, resources, lending or giving money, budget increases, personnel from department to department when people are short, position-related currencies, inspiration-related currencies, so seeing how other people are doing, relationship-related currencies, so acceptance, providing closeness and friendship, personal support and understanding. I think this is a really important one. So one thing that I always try and do when I'm dealing with people is learn something about them and ask about that the next time we're having a conversation, and it really builds that currency. So how are your kids doing? How did Joe do in that presentation you were talking about, whatever the case happens to be. And then personal related currencies, challenge and learning, sharing tasks, sharing experiences, sharing your own failures. Somebody said to me one day, I'm really struggling with what's going on, and I feel like I'm not a part of this, and maybe it's not the right spot for me. And it turned into a story where I told them about a job that I'd had where I decided I had to walk away. It just wasn't the right thing for me, and it wasn't going to work out no matter how I changed things. And that person said to me, "Why didn't you tell me that sooner?" I said, "Well, I didn't think it was necessarily relevant." But your stories of your struggles or your successes help other people see how maybe they can do things, and then it kind of opens up the gates and reduces the barriers so that we're willing to work better together. And gratitude. Always be grateful, when people do things for you, and show that you're grateful, and it will go a long way. Social network building, mapping, stakeholder dependencies, project teams perspective, whose cooperation will we need, whose agreement will we need, and what's the stakeholder's perspective? What differences exist between the team and the people who are on it? How are we going to balance those things? How do the stakeholders view the project? We talked earlier on the slides about how we view the project. Well, recognizing those people that are pulling in might all have different views on it, and how we balance those and show them what's important and why we're doing things, and get out of them what we need through those currencies we talked about in the previous slide. What is the current state of the relationship of the team and with the stakeholders? When we get to chapter 11, we'll talk a little bit more about that and how you build your team, the phases of team building and why that's important. And we talked about that last week too, because how fast you might get through something really does depend on how your team is working and how you're going to schedule things, who's going to work well together, and what are we going to get out of it. Stakeholder map for financial software installation. So just to give you, again, another picture of how big the puzzle can be, this is what we're doing, and here's all the different stakeholder groups who are all going to have different interests in the project, on what's coming out of it, on how it's affecting their budgets and their people, and you're managing basically concurrently all of those things. And then we have management by wandering around. So management by wandering around involves managers spending the majority of their time outside of their offices in order to have face-to-face interactions with employees and building cooperative relationships. And this is why the manager just can't simply do all the work themselves, because they need to know what's going on around them. They need to give the feedback. They need to see what's going on. Oftentimes, people have ideas on how we can do things better, but we have to ask the questions or see how they're doing them. Or if they're struggling on something within the process and how to do it, maybe it's because the instruction just wasn't clear in the way you had explained it or it was written, and you can see that they're struggling and you can do a correction, whether that's writing a new process, changing how things are going, changing who's doing it. But you build those relationships, that rapport and that trust through working that kind of way. The managers that I've worked the hardest for are the ones that come around and see how things are going, and they're the ones that are going to support you through the process and ask you what your challenges are and ask you what your successes are, and they're going to help you with both. Characteristics of effective project managers. So they initiate contact with the stakeholders to keep abreast of developments. This is something I tell my capstone teams with their stakeholders to be doing. If it's nothing more than just a simple email that says, I'm on track, things are going well, or you know what, we fell behind this week, there was a lot of other conflicting things going on, but we're going to do X, Y, and Z to get back up to it. It's amazing how much that little piece of information and showing you're just that little bit extra connected gets you ahead. Anticipating potential problems so that maybe you can either prevent them or have things in play to help the success move forward. Provide encouragement, reinforce the objectives and vision of the project, and intervene to resolve conflicts and prevent stalemates from occurring. So if you can see something isn't going right, if people are maybe communicating that there's a problem, you can't just turn a blind eye as the project manager. If your project's going to be successful, you have to be successful with your people, and everything needs to cohesively work as best as possible. So being a conflict manager and understanding that some days that's not going to be an easy job, stepping in and asking the difficult questions, maybe putting your employees through some team building or some training, something where it takes them out of the mindset of what the current situation is that's developing the problem. It's all thinking about all those things and how you can work through those things that is going to bring success. Managing upward relations. Again, the project manager isn't necessarily a high-level position, so you're not just managing the people that are working on the project, but you're also managing people up the chain in terms of those relationships and getting what you need from them. So again, why they talk about the project manager needing to have the currency of people believing in what they're doing and buying into the project. How do you do that? You have to have a strong degree to which the project has support from top management. And you do that through having an appropriate budget and them understanding what your budget is. It's a history, right? If you always go over budget and over time because you want to show that you're going to do great, you're going to have a history of that, and that's how they're going to see it. So you need to make sure your budgeting is appropriate and in line, and you use reference to get to there. Be responsive to unexpected needs. They're going to ask things of you that you didn't necessarily see that was coming, and how do we adjust for that? How can we maybe ask our people to help with things that were outside of the original scope of the project, but we recognize are important? Send a clear signal to others in the organization of the importance of the project and the need to cooperate. Rescind unreasonable demands. We all want to make people happy. I know I'm a people pleaser, and therefore I'm trying to do all sorts of things to make sure that everybody has what they need and what they want. And sometimes you have to say as the project manager, it's just not going to happen. That just doesn't work with what we're doing. Either the time frame doesn't work, or the resources you've given us don't work, or maybe whatever the project goal is, you don't see it working for the organization based on what you know and what everyone else wants. And being not afraid to say those things. providing additional resources when needed. If your people are saying they're struggling and it's not going to happen, figuring out the way to kind of make it happen, whether we pull from other areas where we feel like we're ahead. Maybe you do have to dig in for a while as a project manager and do the work yourself. So there comes a time where there's going to be skill sets in the project that you do have. There's going to be ones you don't have, and maybe you have to realign so that you can be of more help to the project. And recognize your accomplishments of your team members. I think this is probably one of the biggest keys. And you'll feel it as a project manager when your team members know that you recognize and are grateful for what they've done, whether that's, giving them a pat on the back, having a dinner out with them. It can be small, it can be large. When we get into other slides, we'll talk about, the currencies of reward that can be used with employees, because it's not all the same. Maybe it's an extra day off because you recognize how hard they were working. But when you recognize that people have done well and that they're trying hard, they will continue to do so for you. Lead by example. So I always say I don't have a higher standard or expect any more from anyone else than I would of myself. I will give you what you need. I will set expectation, and then I'm asking you to do the same. And that if there is a problem or it is unreasonable, that you would come to me and tell me that, and then I'm open to the change or whatever needs to happen. You problem solve, you work through the issues, you identify the priorities, and if other people are struggling within the team, to see what the priorities are, that you can help them and push what is important, not just pushing everything on them. Because if you push 20 things on them, you're going to get nothing done. If you say, these are the 5 things that I really need done this week, and this is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they're going to go, okay, I can manage that, right? You can't eat a whole elephant. There's the saying that, you need to bite it off one piece at a time. That's exactly what it is with priorities. Cooperation. Give and take, understanding what's going on, having a sense of urgency to what is important, and fighting the critical fires and not just thinking that everything is a fire. So having a sense of urgency is not go, go, go all the time. It's identifying what is urgent and what can wait and how long it can wait and all those time frames, which when we talked about risk, some of that comes into there, right? And then having a strong sense of ethics that we're going to do what's right. And sometimes that's hard. And sometimes people don't like it, and we're going to have to stand strong to it, but we're going to do what's right. And when you show people that you have those characteristics, you're somebody that they're going to want to work on a project team for. Ethics and project management, there will be ethical dilemmas about things, and you kind of have to balance. Padding the cost and time of estimates because you don't know exactly how it's coming in, but being realistic with your boss, right? Exaggerating payoffs of project proposals. We need to tell them what we think the truth is, and maybe there's a realistic, an optimistic, and a pessimistic version, and we share all that, and then let them decide: are we going to exploit an opportunity to get that higher payback? But listen, the chances of that payback is still only, let's say, 25%. So they have to understand. Falsely assuring customers that everything is on track. I have experienced this in a really uncomfortable way when you start to dig through things and find out that things aren't where they are, and now all of a sudden you're trying to adjust and rush through instead of just having somebody had told the truth up front, and we could have replanned, and now we're replanning at this higher level to try and get things back on track, and then things don't go the way you want them to. Your risk factors go way up, and it becomes almost unmanageable because every activity becomes super, super critical. Being pressured to alter status reports. You want to show that things are good, again, kind of saying things are on track, but if they're not, we need to acknowledge they're not and then have a solution, or maybe say we don't have a solution. Is there somebody that can help? Falsifying cost accounts. So where's the money coming from? Where's the money going? Compromising safety standards to accelerate progress. This is, again, near and dear to my heart. I've lived situations where things have happened, and though it was no fault of my own and no fault of my decision making or what I had done, in order for things to happen, people were doing things that they probably shouldn't have, and the resulting effects was just somebody, in this case, somebody got hurt. And it's something that then you have to live with because your decisions or your pushing on other things pushed people to do those things. So we always want to make sure that people realize safety standards are there for a reason, and people are always going to be worth more than the progress. And let's take that extra 5 minutes and make sure everything's okay. Let's not work 24/7 because people get tired and they make poor decisions or they do things in the wrong manner. Um, I don't ever want anybody to have to be in those kinds of situations. So when you're thinking about things that you're going to accelerate, or crash in timing, don't ever give up on safety standards. They are truly there for a reason. Um, and what can happen is it's not where you want to be, and the punishment too also is just not worth it. So for so many reasons, on an ethical level, on a moral level, on a just, you know what, this isn't what the kind of person I am, whether you're the project manager or whoever you are, and even if it's tough and you have to stand up to people, stick to the safety standards and don't approve shoddy work. Because again, it's going to be used for something, and so many of these things could have effect on people if they've got shoddy work, and there could be consequence. Just take a little bit of extra time, do it the right way, have them fix it. Take your lumps, I think is what I'm going to say here. Sometimes as a project manager, it's the ethical dilemma of you want to have things okay and have people believe it's all okay, or take your lump. And sometimes you just have to take your lump and push forward again. Um, Earlier I said, we talk about the elusive concept of trust. It's a function of character, personal motives and competence, skills necessary to realize the motives. It's sustained through frequent face-to-face contact. And I think it's a struggle for everybody right now with COVID because we're really not having the face-to-face, right? I've talked to the interns I'm working with, and for them, meeting your boss in person versus talking to them on a computer, it's always going to be, better in person. We have to make the most of our situations right now, but truly try, when we get to a point where you can, to meet people in person, to talk to them in person, to build that rapport. Read the body language that they're giving, read the intonation in their voice. You'll see it more in person than you ever will over a computer, or on a phone or through an email. And sometimes we read the cues wrong when we see them those ways. And if you're going to be successful and gain that trust, you've got to work on those things. Consistency. This is the way I am. This is the way I always am. Try not to be up and down with people. It's a consistent, predictable approach. People know what they're going to get from you, and they're accepting of how it's going to be. There's not uncertainty. Openness. Be open to feedback. People are, you're giving people feedback. Expect feedback from them, and then take that and decide what you need to do to be more successful, either moving forward or next time. And a sense of purpose. What is best for the organization and the project? Qualities of an effective project manager. A lot of these things I've talked through on the other slides, but effective communication skills, systems thinking, being organized in how we're moving forward, personal integrity in what goes on, being proactive. So having the team meeting every week and saying, here's where we are, here's where we're going, how are we going to get to the end result? I recognizing we're behind, emotional intelligence to what's going on around you, a general business perspective, which is that greater big approach that we're looking at all the different departments, effective time management, and a little bit of optimism that we can turn this ship around and keep going. And I think in times like this, that's the way we got to see it. We don't necessarily know when the end is going to be and when things are going to change or how they're going to be. We got to be optimistic that things are going to get better and we're going to get through it. So we're just going to stick our nose out there and get it done. Contradictions of project management. So this is part of the reason, you talked about it being good, and then why is it tough? Because we want to innovate and we want to change how we do things, but we also need to maintain stability for our team so that they understand what's going on in the day-to-day. Change is tough, and it's managing that change. It's having your employees trust you in the change. We're going to talk a little bit more in future chapters about agile. And in order for you to be agile, especially in non product dominated industries where we're talking more of process, you need people to trust you to make it work and to be willing to tell you when things are right or wrong or if they can do things differently or better. See the big picture while getting your hands dirty. So understand everything that's going on and all these relationships and how the pieces fit together. And then, you know, for me, when I was doing audits, sometimes it meant I was out there and I was counting parts on a Friday afternoon and making sure we were getting the right ones out, or literally sitting there on the dock with them and being like, we're going to get this part on this truck tonight. Okay, when do we need to move it from section 1 to section 2 before it gets to section 3 and to quality and getting it out the door? So understanding what that was for, but also being a part of making it happen when needs be. Encouraging individuals, but stress the team. So encouraging individuals to show their qualities and their skills, but stressing that we're working as a team and that we can't put our own individualistic, needs and desires necessarily above what is the greater good. I'm sure you guys have taken other courses, maybe some social side courses as electives. The concept to me always comes to mind of utilitarianism and what is the greater good. Being hands off and being hands on. So letting your team do what they need to do and not micromanage, but then stepping in and having them know you're there when they need you. Flexible but firm. What are you going to do today? How are you going to manage your time? That's up to you. But then reminding people and reminding the team that there are things that we need to work for. And also when our stakeholders are asking us to be flexible towards the goals of the project and what they want and maybe some scope change. We can do X, but here's what's going to happen if we do X. Not a problem. We'll try, but here are the potential consequences or the costs or whatever the case happens to be. And managing the team versus organizational loyalties. You have organizational loyalties to how you want to do things, but then you also need to tell the team what they need to do at the end of the day. And if things are not going right, sometimes you just have to put the hammer down and let people live the consequences. We're at the end now. These are the key terms that I've kind of gone over and talked about here, and you should be remembering on what you're managing and how you're managing as a project manager for success. And that is the end of this chapter.